please introduce the director of this afternoon's proceedings, the program coordinator in the office of the Speaker, Colleen Ryan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and the Speaker's afternoon tea. It's in commemoration of our 60 days of activism for no violence against women and children. I now call upon the Speaker, Ms. Sharna Fernandez, to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Good afternoon, goeiemiddag, Molweni, assalamu alaikum, shalom. Premier Helen Zille, Cabinet Ministers, Deputy Speaker Pete Pretorius, Honourable Thoko Didiza, Member of Parliament and Chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, the Africa region, thank you for making the time, members of the National Assembly, permanent delegates of the NCOP, Chief Whip Mark Wiley, members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, Secretary of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, former members of Parliament and of the WCPP, thank you for making the time on a Friday afternoon. Our guest speaker, Ms. Grizelda Grootboom, representatives of United Nations for Women, Mr. Kalua, thank you very much for being here. Representatives of the various NGOs, we engaged earlier in the day, it was a good day, and thank you for making time to join us this afternoon. Honoured guests, it is indeed a pleasure to conduct a little event like this on a Friday afternoon and get such a brilliant reception. I cannot believe that I am the one person between you and the traffic and you and home and you and everything else. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for accepting our invitation to be part of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. We have a Commonwealth Women's Parliament, and our chapter has decided that we are going to launch 16 days of activism. We did it with the Speaker's debate in the House yesterday, which went down very well. Some of you were our guests yesterday. This morning we hosted an expo in the concourse. We had various NGOs who conducted and plied their trade. We heard stories. We had representatives from 27 areas across the metro, 7 out of Khayelitsha, Mitchells Plain, Wantley, Dalk, Strand, the Younger, everyone was in the house. And it was really a good day, I think, for women and activists, children, and the men who joined us. It was really an uplifting experience to be part of the sisterhood earlier this morning. And this afternoon, we've especially dedicated to our members of Parliament, the unsung heroes, the ones who work tirelessly behind the scenes. And today is an opportunity for the members of Parliament to come out and pledge their commitment publicly. I think as an institution, it is our duty. And as the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and as the President of the CPA Western Cape, I felt it my duty with the members, our multi-party group, to say we are going to lead the charge. We know the proceedings start officially tomorrow, but we have set the tone and we look forward not to 16 days of no violence, but I do believe we need to celebrate it. Not celebrate it, we need to be aware, empower, educate 365 days a year. And whilst I was talking to the women this morning, I got this idea. And we talked about the 25th of every month being the Orange Day. And I said, why can't we do this expo in the concourse every 25th of the month? There was such a buzz, jewelry, clothes, badges, everyone pinned me, t-shirts were put on me, all sorts of stuff. But in that way, we keep that flame alive to say that we have reached the point where we are saying enough is enough. Not in my name and not on my watch. The time has come to call it out for what it is, and I think your commitment to being here on a Friday afternoon bears testimony to the fact that you are committed to eradicating gender-based violence. To our members, our former members, it was a bit of a reunion. Daar was gedruk, het was soen en gelach en gehuil. Thank you very much for showing your support. We certainly haven't done this as a once-off. Daar gaan ons weer. It's not a once-off. We would like to invite you to be part of the alumni of the Western Cape Women's Multi-Party Forum. Because I think as women we can take this thing forward, we can deal with it, and we can set the tone, but we need to be prepared to unite around the common cause, and I think yesterday and today we proved that. I also want to acknowledge our patron. Our patron is our Premier, the Honourable Helen Zille, as you all know. And Premier, I would like to call on you at this stage to come forward and to do the introduction of our guest speaker today. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's wonderful to see so many friends from years gone by here. And I think that's a wonderful precedent that we need to keep our bonds going. And when people walk out of here, it's not goodbye, it's see you at the next occasion. So that's really wonderful to see so many present and former colleagues who continue to be friends here today. And it is a particular pleasure for me, Madam Speaker, to welcome the guest of honour here, Grizelda Grootboom. I'm very honoured to be able to introduce her, and I would like to welcome my friend and mentor, Suzanne Ackerman-Berman. It's wonderful to have you here as well. We're here today because tomorrow, the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children begins. And of course, every year we hear people say, well, why only 16 days? And it is a very important question which many people have answered. But I think the He for She campaign is a very good way of addressing that question. There are many campaigns that pit women against men, which I don't think is useful. We're all on this planet for a reason and a purpose, and I think we need to work together to make this place and this planet safe for everyone, and to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to live a life they value, and to make free choices about their lives. There aren't fixed roles for women and fixed roles for men. People must be free to choose how they want to conduct their lives, as long as they don't obstruct other people in the choices they make. And so He for She expresses that for me much better than many of the other campaigns that get conducted at this time of the year. One can't generalize about any category of human beings, and that includes men. And some men are wonderfully facilitative, supportive, nurturing, and loving, and others aren't. And I would say that exactly the same applies to some women. So we look at people as individuals, not as categories into which we assign various attributes and various behavior patterns, and we try to relate to every human being as an individual. Not as a gender category, not as a racial category, not as a historical category, not as a religious category, but as an individual. And that is certainly our founding philosophy, and that is what we seek to do in this particular organisation that I belong to, which doesn't have to be named today, but we certainly try to do that as a government. So to all the men who are here, thank you very much, and a special welcome to you all to listen to our guest speaker, who, as I said, it's my great honour to introduce. When I read about Grizelda Grootboom, I expected to see a very timid and retiring member of society, given what I have read about her life. It shows you how you immediately build pictures of people in your mind when you read about them. And they're just as wrong as the assumptions that you jump to on the basis of the categories that I've just spelt out and rejected. Grizelda is the living example of how people in the most horrific circumstances can chart their own course in life. Some people take the choices they have for granted. Some people even squander their choices and options because they do not realize their value. But it's only when you read about people who faced very few and limited, if any, options in life, and yet created choices for themselves and followed the very difficult paths, that you understand what we simply take for granted. I don't want to tell Grizelda's story because I'm sure she will. But two words really summarize it. The one is the name of her book, Exit, which I presume tells about how you can choose to leave an abusive situation you no longer want to be trapped in. And even if you can't choose, how you can go to others who will help you and support you in that choice. And then Embrace Dignity is the organization that she now belongs to promote women making choices about their own lives. And so Exit and Embrace, I think, are the two bookends of her life. Now, Embrace is not a bookend, it is a process. It is the way we live life and the way we relate to other people. And by exiting a life she did not want to be in, and at many times thought she had no choice over, Grizelda was able to embrace life and to give others the chance to do so too. So I can't think of a more appropriate speaker, Madam Speaker, to have chosen and invited here today, and we all very warmly welcome Ms. Grizelda Grootboom.
Usually I sing for my nerves, but I have a flight to catch. And thank you to the Premier Ms. Helen Zille for the honors and the opportunity. Every platform I meet somebody that brings a memory to the book. And in this room, there's a gentleman in this room, when I was staying at Speaker Shelter, him and his wife used to come and get us every weekend. And he's in this room, and it just makes me wonder the rest of the girls that I grew up with that didn't make it. And I'd like to honor him. The times he was not a doctor, he wasn't a lawyer, he was just a gentleman that had faith in what Tata Madiba said. It's impossible until it's done. And when you look at the Western Cape, when it comes to orphan kids and street kids, ever since Tata did that, and he's one of those gentlemen sitting here in the room today, and there's not many street kids anymore. So I'd like to honor the man that have walked with me at Speaker Shelter in my street days. Thank you, sir, for letting me know. I grew up on the streets of Cape Town in the District 6. I stayed in the Speaker Shelter close to the District 6 Museum. I was one of those street kids you used to see under the bridge in the 90s. Speaker Shelter was an amazing shelter that tried its level best. I think half of the people in this room once walked in that shelter and, donated something. In my years of growing up back and forth on the streets and on Splik from the age of 8 till 18, all we knew was blue and tennis. The District 6 kids will tell you all about it. Some of them didn't make it. And one of those people was Leah. And Leah used to stay with us in the shelter. She was your tiny little petite Khoisan girl with the yellow teeth and gold kihara. And Leah just decided to take one day a walk through the Cape Gardens on a Saturday, because in our duties, in the shelter there were rules. 4 till 5, you can be outside. And Leah got gang raped on Lion's Head. And we got the news as street kids through the word of mouth as street kids, of course, because we knew every corner. Not like everybody today, they know where Adderley Street is. If you tell us Adderley Street, we don't know. You tell us Jan, we know Jan van Riebeeck statue, because that's where we stayed. And that's how we know the city of Cape Town, through the map of the history that's there. Going through the years, growing up between the shelters, when you turn 18, of course, everybody knows it, the policy of organizations and shelters and safe houses. You turn 18, there's no more space in place for you. Or you're over age to be with younger kids and the influence that you could give them. Of course, due to that and the death of Leah, I fell under more depression than who I am as an outcast of the street kid from District 6. I fell in the hands of a friend. And I call her a friend because if you know very well the District 6 history, our constitution was the gangsterism life, the 26 and the 28. And if you as a stranger come into that territory, we have to stand for you with those constitutions so you can be safe while we're smoking drugs. Due to that, she became a close friend. She came from a very well family. But of course, the outcast street kids was access to quick drugs for her. And that's how she became a friend of mine. She found out that, oh, at 18, I had no place to go and wash 3 times a week, and she thought she could take an opportunity in my life with that. She invited me to Johannesburg, which is a city I've never been to. And I knew with her, she's my friend. You know, when she was high, we never raped or killed her. We had the power to do that, but we still kept her safe, and she would still go back home. But I didn't know that she saw my vulnerability, my poverty, as an opportunity for her to profit. She took me to Johannesburg, got there, Yeoville, not far from Hudson, Methodist Church, and I was so excited. If you know where we come from, street kids, the only thing you smell is boxes and pee. So we walked in the house and the wooden floors were so fresh that my spirit knew and felt the hope that this is going to change. Not knowing that she had plans for my body. We walked in the room. I was high on my Tennyson glue, of course. Very hungry. And she said she was going to get me food, and that was the last time I saw her. In my passing out, we call it the tip in Asa. First thing that woke me up was a kick. Punches and everything was just going. As a street kid, we have an animal instinct in us where you know you have to survive. And the first thing I thought, she's coming back, I'm in the wrong house, or this house is getting robbed. All of those passed and the whole thing just happened. Being undressed and injected behind my legs with crystal meth so my lower body and the nervous system could start getting numb. No time wasted. Customers started coming into my nudity. Find pleasures with whatever they wanted to do with the top and the bottom of my nudity. In the morning you can smell, oh, he's fresh from home. In the afternoon you can smell, he had a cigar meeting. Your eyes are duct tape, and every time, third, second line, ecstasy, or another line of cocaine. In the middle of the night I was exchanged with a younger girl. By then I'm smelling enough of semen for no policeman to even worry about the fact that I am or in need of help. I looked like a prostitute. I smelled like one. No time wasted, I joined the rest of the women in the truck stop in Johannesburg, Park Station. Back then the Park Station was a heavy truck stop. The girls taught me, said, get into the truck stop, get yourself a customer, and come and join the rest of us in Beria. I was welcomed by the men that runs the wonderful ring, the pimps. Welcome to the city of Joburg. From the age of 18, from one province to another, one community to another, every day until the age of 26. I say that age because you do not survive to any age under the authority of a man. At 26, I was working in Port Elizabeth. Our country was holding the most amazing sports, especially the cricket. It was the World Cricket, and some of the games were hosted in Port Elizabeth. The brothel was happening, and I was the only black child with double D breasts that the men were happy to find pleasure in. I got used to the structures and the system, and not knowing I got pregnant with my baby girl Summer. I call this summer because we had to work the first month, the second month, the third month, the fifth month, from 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning. And if she kicked, me and the girls had a moment of joy. In 6 months, the madam told me that the baby should be removed. The customers enjoyed the pressure on my vagina. No time wasted. In-house abortion took place. 3 hours later, I was asked to use sponges to keep the blood away so the customers can come and find pleasure again. I was made up by the girls and saying they don't understand why would she make me up to 6 months. Usually 3 months is abortion time for our girls. And that was when I said, I'm done. And when you say you're done, because the deal was brought in, the madam drops drugs for the pimp and he brings a new girl. And that's the contract over your life or your head for her. So when you said no to a client, that's a death penalty for you. And when I said no, no time wasted. Her husband and the bouncers drove me down the stairs into a car and made sure that I'm unconscious by the time I get to Johannesburg City. Woke up a month later, next to me a Salvation Army girl and a nun, the good deed people in our country. And all she said is, find out what she was supposed to be doing. I felt like choking her, because she was in a safe space. Of course, I was very inspired by her persistence playing behind the scenes. At the age of 26, a black child cannot get a rehab with no identity. But she made sure that she signs up for me in a rehab and saying I'm in one of her programs. And in Onsplit we were taught if there is a project, you become the project. So always take an opportunity of a project. You might make it out. She made sure that I get rehab at the age of 27. At the age of 28, she also tried to make sure I work for Home of Hope, which back then was a shelter for girls that was in prostitution. When they have babies, they throw their babies away, and this shelter would take those babies in and try to keep them alive. And I was shocked at every baby that I had to rock and clean when they were brought in from the drains and bins. And they would smile because I lied to them that I would make sure, no matter what, that none of them will ever enter the sex trafficking or the sex slavery. This year at the United Nations on the 27th of September, when we were taking forth the Global Action Plan against human trafficking, sex slavery, my point was more than the implementation of it. And that was the most important word that I had to make sure. I grew up through organization systems. I grew up to moments when they said that Madiba's having his birthday, we must wear big t-shirts and then go to the Gold Rush City, but most of the girls' kids didn't come back because the system of that day was not held well to bring all those kids back again. I grew through moments where you have to fight for funding just so you can get toiletries. So there's no loopholes I don't know about helping the outcast or any child that's in need to come out from slavery. Today they try to call it labor slavery. But if you look at the stats, most of the people that are being trafficked are women and girls through all the global countries. And for me as a survivor, the sex trafficking they're doing it is for sex trafficking or sex slavery. But today I stand before you with a dignified way I can spell my name, Grizelda Grootboom, on a book called Exit. I titled the book Exit because we were lined up in the brothel every day to stand in front of the door. The whole club is dark and you're looking at this sign Exit while clients walk in and out. He gets done with you, you line up again, you never walk out. And when I decided to know how to read and spell and see my name, I wanted to know that I've Exit. I am the new founder and the only founder of the foundation called Survivor Exit today. And that foundation is a foundation that I'm willing to take through the global areas to make sure no child or no woman should only find one choice to take care of herself, as in to open and sleep and her body to be sold for economical growth in her life, or education, or feeding her family. We all have a right. That's why we all screamed freedom in 1994. I remember that day because I stole half of people's IDs. But I'm still struggling at the age of 36 for my freedom. And I'm struggling with the headlines that we get every day on South African newspapers. Another girl is dead. She's younger. You call her brothel. There's a 12-year-old. There's a 13-year-old. You look at the porn sites. They're not even consensual anymore because children are deciding to do their own porn movies in school uniforms. Oh, we can talk about it politically, economically, historically, generationally. But I will still say it. As Africans, we come from the apartheid of slavery. We've decided to shift that slavery to women and girls. And today I would like you to ask yourself, would you own children? Would you sell them? May you be blessed. Thank you.
Speaker, I would just like to call you to get Grizelda Grootboom to sign the pledge with you.
Grizelda, has she left? Sorry. Unfortunately, Grizelda has had to leave because she's due to catch a flight to Denmark. I think she's become a global ambassador, so sadly she has had to run. But we will now ask the Premier, because Premier too has a busy life, and Premier, I'd like to call on you to please join us in signing the He for She pledge, which Mr. Kalua will cover later, but we would want, for the record, we would want your signature on our pledge form, please. You may stay there on this pledge. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. The gift for Grizelda, I don't know who is Suzanne. Someone could take it. We had her. I know she's had to leave in a real great big rush, but if we could just, it was meant in the beautiful step up. Sorry. She's gone too. Okay, she's going to come back. Can we leave this till later? So we'll. Sorry, our program is a bit tight. So I'm just going to ask you to bear with me. I didn't anticipate that hasty exit. I think we still have just a minute to say thank you and acknowledge Grizelda's.
She's coming back.
Okay, she's going to be back. So then we'll continue with the program when she gets back. I just want to use this opportunity to say I read this book last year, and for those of you who haven't purchased the book, it is a read that will rock you to your core. I was at a women's parliament last year in Victoria. That's a Thoko, the national parliament had organized a national women's parliament, and I was presented the book as a gift, and I tell you that book rocked me to my core. And I made it my business to try and understand and get to meet this woman so I could hear and see her in the flesh. And I must say that I'm glad that we managed under very difficult circumstances to get her to just even grace us. But I tell you, the little bit that you heard is nothing. You really do have to do yourself the justice of reading that book and actually understanding it. It is a remarkable story of resilience, of survival, of everything that one can think, the human spirit, how she has risen above the odds. And today she represents not only women, but South Africa at international platforms, and I think that is indeed noteworthy. I'd like to ask you to put your hands together for her in her absence, please. Member Beerwood, yes, now we'll deal with the gift. Member Beerwood, could I ask you to come forward? Will you need to introduce our next speaker, please? Again, sadly, guests, we are at Friday afternoon. It is a tight program. People need to get to airports, places and spaces. And so still, thank you. I see you having a cup of tea amidst all the madness. I know you've got to get out there and fight your way through the airport queue. But thank you for making it time. I hand over to Member Beerwood.
Thank you. I'm also sorry that Grizelda left, because I would have wanted to just thank her and motivate her, and I hope that those who are sitting here today will not mind if I just repeated something that I said yesterday, which I felt so aptly reminds me of her. And these were the words I used yesterday. I said, survivors of violence and abuse are recognized by their courage, because when all else goes silent, they step forward and share their truth so that others can know that they're not alone in their struggle. However, knowing when to walk away is wisdom. Being able to do so is courage. Doing so with your head held high is dignity. Get up. That's exactly what she did. So in absentia, Grizelda, thank you for telling us your story. We are most certainly motivated. But now let me go over to something which really gives me a lot of pleasure, greatly humbled and honored to do this. And I switch gears for a minute. I am extremely honored to welcome a role model, an activist, a seasoned cadre, and an absolute true representative of women's rights and values. Honorable Angela, and I normally call her Angela, Thoko Didiza, is an elected member of the African National Congress and first became a member in 1994 as the first woman Deputy Minister of Agriculture in the cabinet of President Nelson Mandela. From 1994 to 2006, Honorable Didiza served as Minister of Agriculture and Land Affairs. It was during this time that she convened the 2005 National Land Summit in order to reflect on South Africa's land reform. From 2002 to 2006 to 2008, she served as Minister of Public Works. In 2005, Honorable Didiza was named one of the young global leaders by the World Economic Foundation. Before coming to Parliament, Honorable Didiza was Secretary General to the Women's National Coalition, responsible for producing the Women's Charter for Effective Equality. She was also active in the women's and youth movements prior and post-1994. She served as a youth coordinator of the South African Council of Young Women Christian Association. Honorable Didiza is currently the House Chairperson of the National Parliament, responsible for internal arrangements, and at the last Commonwealth Parliament session was elected the Chairperson of the Women's Parliament Africa region. I think you can give her a hand for that. She recently delivered a keynote address in the KZN legislature on the role of the Commonwealth women parliamentarians in playing an oversight role. Recently, from the 29th to the 30th of August, she was instrumental in hosting an international conference at National Assembly with the theme, Women in the Changing World of Work. To her, I'd like to say, here is to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member and Comrade, Speaker of the Legislature, Sharna Fernandez. You will be responsible if I lose my flight. Premier of the Western Cape, Honourable Helen Zille in her absence, Guest Speaker Grizelda Grootboom in her absence, Mr. Temba Kalua, Honourable Members of the Provincial Legislature present here, our alumni who are here, some of them are laughing, don't choke, comrades and friends, good afternoon. When I listen to Grizelda, I actually remember one of the, I would say, the known quotations, I don't know from who, because it looks like it's anonymous, that actually the scars that remain don't define you, but rather show that you are a survivor. And I think for many women who have been victims of violence and abuse, be it emotional or physical, because emotional scars are never seen, but they are survivors. It is with humility that I accepted the invitation to participate in your event today. As a woman legislator, an activist, a woman and a mother, there remains a thread that binds us together, regardless of our political persuasions, religious, cultural, and family backgrounds. We are South Africans, Africans, and citizens of the globe. As women, we comprise more than half of the global citizens, and therefore we have a responsibility to shape the world that we live in for ourselves and the generations of those who will come after us. We're gathered here to reflect on what we can do together to put an end to violence that is meted to our fellow women and children in our country and globally. As women in the legislature, the question we need to continue to ask ourselves is, what can we do to advance the interests of women and society in these walls of power that we walk through? In the first instance, we need to acknowledge that though we may have come to these corridors through the tickets of our political parties, there is a silent expectation from women and girls in our country that we collectively, we will not forget the women's interests and concerns. We acknowledge the struggles that these women who came before us have fought to ensure that women's voices are not lost in struggle, and that women's voices are not lost in the present as we transform our society, and that women's voices are not lost as we nurture our democracy. It is these women from whom we have learned that ensured the equality clause in our constitution is actually scribed into a clause. Some of them are here, some of those alumni who walked to the World Trade Center just after the collapse of CODESA, and in the multi-party democracy when it was convened, the women in their multicultural, different political parties and religious bodies marched to the World Trade Center and actually demanded that they be two negotiators, one of whom would be a woman. And I think that lesson was, in my view, young as I was at the time, a very powerful instrument that women working together can make a difference. It is these women in their political religious diversity that ensured that we canvassed women's views on what a new democratic South Africa should look like. Through that process, we produced the Charter for Effective Equality, which was presented in 1994 in Parliament. It is these heroines that proved beyond doubt that women united can make a difference in their lives and the lives of their nation. In 1996, women of our country were part of the Constituent Assembly. Not only those who were the first members of Parliament, but also those many women who were outside, in the women's movement, in the legal fraternity, who made sure that the Constitution, which is the supreme law of our land, will ensure the equal rights of all citizens. Women legislators have been the architects of a new democratic South Africa. Sometimes we forget, in the midst of our filibustering in Parliament, forget the role that we continue to play. We acknowledge the efforts of many of you seated here as women legislators in crafting new laws that have changed the situation of women. Some of the laws that relate to the topic that we're discussing today on gender-based violence are Domestic Violence Act, Sexual Offences and Related Matters, Protection from Harassment Act, Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, Recognition of Customary Marriages Act, Maintenance Act, Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act, Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill. Reflecting on these statutes, one can attest to the work that women in our legislatures have done. However, the problem of gender-based violence continues to be a challenge in our society. I'm sure some of you, as you're listening to this legislation that I've highlighted, you may be wondering, how come customary law is a factor when it comes to gender-based violence? Remember that those women who were married through customs actually never benefited on civil rights marriages, particularly on inheritance. It's a form of violence for somebody who has stayed with you, who has been part of your life, and when she's supposed to benefit, the paper is used that you are not recognized. So it's part and parcel of that reality that we had to change. Again, Maintenance Act is another form of abuse, where together you have produced a child, and when that child has to be nurtured and grow, the other party disappears and abandons his responsibility. So those legislation, even though they may not classically fit on what one calls, legislation against gender-based violence, they are, because when that woman carries that burden of raising a child until adulthood, it actually robs her of her economic independence. It robs her of the resources that she could have used in improving even her own livelihood, which then goes to nurture alone that child. But why does this challenge of gender-based violence continues, albeit a number of legislations and protocols that we have signed to as a country? I've asked myself many questions. Have we lost the values that bind us as communities together? What has happened to the role of the family? The way we raise and nurture our children, does that actually show equality? Does that in itself encourage respect of one another? Or do we actually continue to instill the very stereotypes that tigers will cry when it comes to young men expressing themselves? And then they bottle up. And what happens later, because they've never been taught of how to express themselves, they see their partners as punchbags to whom they must release their stress. How do we build peaceful communities where differences are resolved through dialogue? I was saying to someone yesterday, one of the difficulties I've had in raising children, I have never been able to spank my child. Not because of the current legislation, just because I've never understood, even when I was young, why can't somebody talk to me? I remember I was doing grade 4, and I don't know what I had done, so my dad decided that I was going to get some few lectures. Obviously you cry, but after wiping my tears, I looked him in the eye, I said, why is it that between you and mom, when we have actually had what we call a mistake, you are able to say, I'm sorry, and explain yourself. But when it comes to us, we have to experience some pain. I think he was caught unawares because, gosh, this child, and he's the last one, I've raised 2, before her and they've never complained. So he looked at me. I think he was lost of words. But afterwards, he said, I understand, so what do we do? I said, allow me when I've made a mistake, because to me there's logic in why I did what I did. And then we can discuss the form of punishment thereafter. And that happened from that time. So I will explain myself, and he will then explain himself about why he thinks I've broken the parameters of what I shouldn't, and I would either be punished by not going to play with my friends for a week outside, or not visiting my grandmother who was not staying very far from us. You know, some kind of things that really I felt hurt that I couldn't do. But it removed the physical pain. And from there, I could not even with my own children. So we sit, we have a dialogue about what is wrong. There are things that I don't know that I do, which they say, we know. Once you say, Thoko's children and not call us by name, something is wrong. Or that walk. So I said, which walk? They said, we'll never tell you because you will change. But what that means is that there are forms that we can use as societies at a family level to groom children to know the alternatives without violence. And I ask myself, what are we doing as mothers, as women, who most of the time spend a lot of time with our children, so that we groom them as these citizens who can mediate rather than, you know, go into violence as a form of revenge. The second issue is, how do we start conversation in our society from a peace building as opposed to conflict resolution? Because once you talk about conflict resolution, you admit that conflict has happened. But maybe we need to start and say, what are the anchors for building peace in our society? One of those, in my view, is to make sure that equality between men and women is not just a right that we talk about, but it's a right that we can claim and exercise. It is also about how in our curricula we start to bring in dialogue as a form of resolving differences. It is also about how our conduct as legislature, even when we differ, we can show a modicum of respect. You know, at times, politics is said to be a hard game. What is the difference that women bring or should bring in the legislature that must create this modicum of a society that respects itself? It's an issue, in my view, that we need to grapple on. Because when we said we want to increase more women in parliament so that we are not seen but we are also heard, it's also about the difference that we bring in the constitution of these institutions of power in which we work. The other issue of my reflection was, how do we exercise power in these spaces in which we work? As we make laws, as we undertake our oversight, as we ensure accountability. How do we ensure that the views of those women who are not in these spaces are not lost in the middle? But how can we do that if we continue to work separately? I know it's a very difficult situation when we come to working across parties. Because on one hand, our ideological position will have their permutations. On one hand, our manifestos have to be, you know, manifest. But at the end of the day, We need to be able to say, how do we build the sisterhood as we did prior to 1994? So that on the issues that matter, such as issues of violence against women and children, we can be able to work across our political differences and make a difference for women. But also, how do we embrace our diversity? You know, one of the legacies of our past, it's where we've looked at pigmentation and define who you are and how I relate to you. And as South Africans, we have a responsibility, particularly as women, to actually deal with that reality. Honorable Fernandez, and my comrade, when we were in Bangladesh, it was very difficult to move around because of the security issues. So in my fit of frustration, I said to these security people, you know, if I were to wear my Punjabi and wear my scarf, how would you differentiate me that I'm not an Indian? Because my color is just like you. And I can speak Hindi more than you can. This guy looked at me, I think he was just flustered. But what I was trying to say to him is that this difference, because you are protecting me so much because I'm not a national, can actually be diffused if I were to be an imposter. And coming from Durban with many Indians, I can do that very well. But I'm saying there's a point at which, as women in the legislature, we also need to start to deal with issues of racism in our society. Because it continues to play a negative in the reconstitution of our society. It continues to make us to look at each other as different when we are one. How can we actually use our difference and our diversity to build a stronger nation? My view is it is possible. And I hope, as the Multi-Party Women's Caucus and the CWP chapter, as you continue with your work, these are some of the issues you must grapple with. But I want to say to the alumni, one of the things we've decided to do as a project, as CWP, is to build an alumni of women in the legislatures so that we can draw the lessons from the work that you did. And I think, collectively, we owe it to ourselves to honor these women from 1994 who led before us. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Didiza. And the note in front of me was, I just afraid you will miss your flight. I now call on Honorable Buerta.
Whilst Honourable Beerwinkel is coming up, Honourable Didiza, may I take the opportunity to ask you to sign our he for she pledge so that we have it on record, and thank you for your gracing us today. And I know you got it up, but I'm sure we'll get you to the airport on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Didiza, for the words and the encouragement and the reinforcement of the debate of yesterday. You just reinforced us, and you alluded us to the fact that the work is not done. There is still plenty to be done. And that as lawmakers and as legislators, we need to take our communities, we need to lead them. And we need to communicate with them and encourage them and pave the way forward for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope I will get the report with the pictures so that I can put it on the CWP website internationally.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, because Grizelda Grootboom lives in such a hurry, I'm just going to call Suzanne Ackerman-Berman just to say a few words, and thereafter I'm going to ask Honorable Dear Virgo to come and just present a gift on behalf of it.
Thank you. Really, it's not to take the stage, this ladies, it's a privilege, gentlemen, to be here. And just on behalf of Grizelda, who you saw left very suddenly, she gets extremely emotional in recounting her story. She asked me to thank you for the honor of talking to all of you in such incredible company. She was totally overwhelmed. And she is on her way to the airport, and she's catching a flight to Finland to speak with United Nations people in Finland. I just hope she makes her flight. So she's deeply grateful for the honor of being here, and she just apologizes that it was a bit overwhelming. She didn't get a chance to come back and sign, and she's asked me if we would all sign on her behalf. Thank you.
Honorable Dear Virgo, could you just hand it over to Suzanne, please? I would now like to call on the He for She campaign gentleman from the UN. His name is Mr. Kalua.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's there. Honorable Speaker, the various protocols have already been said, so allow me just to say all protocols observed. I would like to begin by really congratulating the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for taking this bold step to ensure that gender equality is embedded in the very structures that represent the citizens of this province. And I would also like to congratulate you for the positive strides that you've made in gender equality, because I understand that the representation of women in your parliament is about 40% or thereabouts. So congratulations for that. But also congratulating you for the events and the discussions that you had yesterday and the events this morning. While there has been some progress in South Africa on gender equality, including on issues to do with policies as highlighted by Honorable Didiza, we know that we have a long way to go. Issues of gender-based violence, which has been spoken to very eloquently by the previous speakers, we understand that the issue of gender-based violence is still a huge challenge in this country and even in this province. There are some studies that are highlighting that almost 50% of women in this particular province report experiencing some form of violence, be it emotional, economic, physical, or sexual, at least once in their lifetime, both within and outside intimate relationships. There is also need to change negative social norms and practices that perpetuate inequality and promote negative or toxic masculinities. There is need to empower women economically and reduce poverty, which affects the majority of women. But as you know, with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, we have now an opportunity to make a difference. Because as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, there is a standalone goal, which is goal number 5 on gender equality. But in addition to that, the rest of the goals have integrated gender equality in the various targets. So let me now talk about the He for She that you are here for. What is this He for She? This is a solidarity movement which was launched in September 2015 by the UN Secretary General. And it was born out of the conviction that gender equality is not just a women's issue. It's an issue for all of us, men, women, boys and girls. He for She has provided a platform for boys and men to engage on issues of gender equality. by better understanding how gender inequality limits the abilities of individuals, businesses, communities to reach their full human, economic, and social potential. Since its launch, the He for She has been able to mobilize more than 1.7 million men across the globe. And these men are acting as catalysts for change. As part of the He for She, we have what we call a 10 by 10 by 10 impact champions. And this impact champion initiative, there are 10 heads of state, presidents and heads of state of different countries. There are 10 CEOs at the global level, and there are 10 university chancellors or presidents that have signed up for He for She and have made specific commitments on what they are going to do in their respective institutions or countries on gender equality. At the recent UN General Assembly in September this year, these 10 by 10 by 10 champions made and shared the successes and the solutions that they're coming up in the achievement of gender equality and women empowerment. For example, let me share two or so examples. The President of Malawi, Honorable His Excellency Arthur Peter Mutharika, shared the story of how his country has ended child marriages once and for all, allowing thousands of girls to go back to school. Bob Moritz, the chairperson of PricewaterhouseCoopers International Limited, shared a story of how his organization has gone from 18% of female representation in leadership in January 2016 to 47% in December 2016. Paul Boyle, the president of Leicester University, led a conversation on how students are coming up with solutions to gender-based violence in the campuses. But you may ask that these are all high-profile people. How about ordinary men and boys in the communities? We also heard lots of stories from men around the world who now respond when they hear their neighbor beating up the wife or girlfriend. And this is so important because Grizelda's story that she has shared, I'm sure there are so many men who were around her who could have picked up that there's something going wrong and prevented it. So this culture of silence and bystander is something that He for She is trying to address so that we mobilize men and boys as partners in gender equality and women empowerment. When women work together, we achieve tremendous results. But the results are even bigger when men and women work together. With your legislative and oversight function as a parliament, you have a critical role to play in breaking the structures and stopping practices that promote inequality between men and women in this province. So I would like to challenge you, honorable members, to say today you're signing up for He for She. But what are your individual specific commitments that you're making on gender equality and women empowerment? I would like to share with you some suggestions for your consideration. One is the area of gender responsive budgeting. And gender responsive budgeting is not about creating a separate budget for women or solely increasing spending on women's programs, but rather it is to ensure that the allocation and the collection of and the allocation of public resources is carried out in ways that are effective and contribute to advancing gender equality and women empowerment. Parliament can play a role through your oversight role in ensuring that the application of gender responsive budgeting. So that's one area. The second area is around passing legislation that is gender responsive and reviewing all legislations that you feel are discriminatory and repealing them. We should recognize that in South Africa, there are many progressive policies, as alluded to by Honorable Didiza. But we should also recognize that policies, while they are an important step, more needs to be done in challenging mindsets and stereotypes and patriarchal structures. And this is where you also play a role as members of parliament within your own constituencies. And the fourth area that I would like to highlight is the area of gender-based violence, I think, which is a major issue that has brought us today. And in this province and in the communities around, by making sure that you're also making investments that are commensurate with the challenge. On this, I must commend you for the discussions that you had yesterday on this particular issue. I must also highlight the significance of this sign-up, which is occurring on the eve of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and the start of the 16 Days of Activism, which is starting tomorrow. This campaign is led by UN Women at a global level, and it is a campaign which was launched by the United Nations Secretary General in 2008. And the purpose of the campaign was really to put a spotlight on issues of violence against women and girls. And we used the period of 16 days to highlight these issues. But as other previous speakers have spoken, we need to make sure that the conversation about violence not only happen during 16 days, but it's a continuous conversation throughout the year. The theme for this year is Leave No One Behind, End Violence Against Women and Girls. And this is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, which emphasizes the principle of not leaving anyone behind. While no one group of women or girl is exempted, the risks and experiences for some are greater. And in this regard, I would like to highlight, for instance, women who are marginalized and are experiencing overlapping inequalities. The LGBTQI women, women with disabilities, women who are living in poverty, women in rural areas, migrant women, refugees, women living with HIV, and so on and so forth. So these categories of women require a special attention. I would also like just to share with you that as part of the 16 days and as part of celebrating Unite Orange campaign, the Table Mountain will be lit orange on the evenings of 25th November and 7th December to symbolize. And this is to symbolize the commitment by the city of Cape Town, the province, to strive towards the strides that you want to make for a society that is free from gender-based violence. At UN Women, we are therefore looking forward to hearing reports of improvements in the lives of women and girls in this province as a result of the commitments that you're making today. I wish to express our commitment as UN Women to supporting the implementation and tracking of your commitments made today. Once again, I would like to congratulate you for all your commitments to gender equality, which I'm sure will go a long way in ensuring that no girl or woman is left behind in the province of the Western Cape. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Kalua, thank you so much for your contribution to today's proceedings. A lot of what you covered, we had debated yesterday and today, and we talked to leaving no one behind. But you know what I found fascinating was we have a representative from the UN Woman, and it's Mr. Kalua. And I said, now that is breaking. Those are the barriers we need to break, and in our effort to get to the core of gender-based violence. So I would like to thank you and your institution for making the time on a busy Friday to be here with us. I did in my speech yesterday in the speakers' debate talk to the fact that just over some 12,000 signatures have been placed despite us having almost 57 million people in South Africa. And you can be sure I am going to ask the people in this room, once the proceedings continue, to quietly come up to the board and do the signing so that we can make sure that we add to that number at least 30 or 40 more signatures. A small presentation and token of our appreciation. Thank you so much for the time that you spent with us. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me, today has been a bit of a roller coaster. A little bit of a disappointment that Grizelda had to just rush off, But I'm certain I'm going to be able to negotiate at some point in some time for her to come and finish the story, because I think it is a really valuable story that gives us something to hold on to. You know, often you hear these horror stories, and just today, whilst I was talking to the group of activists who I acknowledge in the room here, a lady came to me very tearful after the event, and I see my friend Lucinda Evans sitting over there, en sy sê vir my, Lucinda, Speaker, ek wil amper huil. Ek sê, wat gebeur, waaroor gaan het nou? My 2 kleinkinders, een is 4, was laatst week verkragt, en die een is 8, she was raped this week. I mean, how can a parent and a grandparent endure pain like that? And I was too emotional to deal with it, and I just asked the lady, will you leave your details with me? And I will ensure that somehow, somewhere, I do something about this. The message that came out of my talk with the activists this morning was, when you see something, say something. Because our silence, by virtue of our silence, we are complicit. And I think the time has come for us to speak up and talk about the animal, the elephant in the room. So I want to thank you for being here with me today, being with us at Western Cape Provincial Parliament. We almost like a family. And it was a bit of a reunion when the alumni came in, and I honor you ladies. Thank you for the work that you have done over the past 20 years, and thank you for accepting our invitation to be here today. I mean, op Vrydagmiddag, waar kan ek vir Tannie Alta nie kry nie? Alta, ek sien jou daar. And to our guests on the side too, thank you so much. We want to incorporate you into the plan. We want to see the bigger picture. We don't just want it to be a closeted little group of people planning. We need to take this thing bigger. We must stretch the net wider. So today is actually your first official alumni meeting with us. Accept that it's now no longer an invitation. In future, we'll just pick up the phone, and if you're willing and able, we'd like to call you to come and help us address the burning issues. Mr. Kalua put a challenge to us. As legislators, we have a duty to revisit legislation, because I think that is the space within which we can play. And it is important that we look at legislation that actually prejudice women, and we need to review the situation. And after the stories that you hear, and one of the big issues that came out today was the fact that the justice system is failing our victims, sadly. And we need to start talking about the real issues, because at the end of the day, we have a wounded society. We have many people walking around broken. You might not see their scars, but emotionally their psyche is wounded. And when you have a broken society, you see what is playing out here as we see it. So I want to thank you all. NGOs, you made my day. The joy when I saw your faces and I got out there today. They sang such beautiful songs. They celebrated each other as women. We took pictures, we hugged, we laughed, we cried. So for me, it was one of those, this was a wild day. But I also realized that in some small way, our institution is making a difference in the world of ordinary people out there. Because at the end of the day, it is not about the MP, it is not about the institution, it is actually about the people on the ground, Joe and Jane citizens, who we should be serving. And this is why I thought today was so insightful. To our current members, the MEC, the premiers and all other guests, I want to say thank you very much. Vrijdagmiddag was nou moeilijk. And now I'm the only person between you and what's out there. But I'd like to ask you to, there are some treats, and I know some people never ate, so waiting until we get the instruction, the opdracht. Others have tucked in, and I think it's a good idea. I'd like to ask you not to just run off and leave, but I'd like to call you to come and take a picture, sign the pledge, have something to eat, and network. Meet someone, talk to just before you go home. Talk to one person that you had never spoken to before. Because when I spoke to the ladies today, I said to them, the most divisive thing that is happening in the world of NGOs and NPOs is turf protection. Yeah, that's my project, jy kan nie daar gaan nie, and no, that's my project, you're a copycat, you can't, die raadslid meng weer in, these are all the stories that we hear people saying out there. And I think it is so important that we work together as a sisterhood because we can only be better together. So I also have to say thank you to Mr. Jose guys. Thank you, Jose, for providing us with the soft music. We might not all have heard it, but I know you can give us a tinkle and a tonk as we go along. And the music indeed has been good. And then I want to ask you all to give each other a round of applause. We have presenters, we have NGOs, we have reps, we have members, all on it. Let's just give it up for everybody in the room because I think together we have made, and this has not been a one-man show, so it would be remiss of me at this stage not to say thank you to the team of people who work behind the scenes. You know, we're a little parliament, we've got the smallest number of members, but we pull off the most amazing feats. And I tell you, the staff always produce. They have never, in the 40-odd months that I've been here, they have never once let me down when it comes to an event. So to the team of people who work behind the scenes, I thank you for making it so effective. So I want to wish you all travel safely, and just remember, not only 16 days, every day, 365, and I am going to be engaging Mr. Kalua because we want to explore that plan of having the Orange Day on the 25th every month in the concourse, just to create, you know, I mean, tourists stopped and asked, what is this about? What is going on? The produce that the women made was being sold. The activists were handing out pamphlets. There was education about human trafficking, all sorts of things. So we can actually make it work. And I think to see Table Mountain lit up in orange is going to be just something else. So I want to thank you for your kind attention. And once again, thank you for gracing our table today. We do appreciate your presence. And I don't want to be the difference between you and what's out there. So enjoy the time with us, connect, network, and please do sign our pledge because that is so important. And for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to purchase the book, if I may encourage you, it might seem like, oh, just for a book, but it's a book that's going to change your perspective around women and violence and human trafficking and drugs and. I thank you kindly.